I'm going to be talking about a subject that is, in certain ways, quite extreme from the way everybody thinks. In other ways, I think it's one of the most helpful things for us to learn at this time. It's a greater explanation of what's going on in the world, the attitude we should hold, and how we can be contributors. I always speak with these two pictures in front of me. This is Paramhansa Yogananda. Many of you know him from his book, Autobiography of a Yogi. And this is his disciple, an American disciple who was my personal teacher. I met him when I was 22 in 1969, which was a long time ago. So I'm going to be giving you some big ideas, but they're not ideas that I myself made up. They're what Yogananda presented as the ancient teaching of India about the nature of the planet at this time, the future of the planet, and how our own personal karma and personal destiny plays out in that context. Almost everyone who thinks about civilization and progress on the planet thinks in extremely linear terms. And most common science and history is that we were Neanderthals and we came up in this straight line, and here we are. I often would think if this is the apex, we are really in trouble. But that's how people think. And we also look now and we see that we have enormous conflicts and all kinds of circumstances, whether it's earth cataclysms, economic troubles, social troubles, everything. It's an extraordinarily insecure time that we're living in. In the last few years, I've traveled a lot around the world, really an astonishing amount. We've been in about 30 countries in the last 3 years. And everywhere I go, without exception, from Latvia to Finland to Japan to South Africa, people ask what is going on and what's going to happen. Paramhansa Yogananda was a great prophet and a great master of self-realization, and he predicted that the times we are in now are going to get worse before it's going to get better. And that's not a very comforting thought. And there have been many others who have also said the same thing. Mother Mary appearing in Medjugorje, Padre Pio in Italy, a very well-known Venezuelan woman, they all just say, we are in a time of enormous transition, but that transition is not going to be simple. It's not going to be harmonious, that the polarizing forces will create increasing tension and increasing troubles. Now, in his autobiography, Yogananda wrote about an ancient tradition that is not unique to India. India has an unusual position on planet Earth because it is the only continuous civilization that has been essentially the same going back thousands of years. Yoga, meditation, the rishis, Kundalini, changes of consciousness. The outer expression of that fundamental philosophy has changed over many years, but the teaching has never changed. Hinduism is a word that was actually a concept that was actually imposed on India by the British because they could tell that they were different, and the British think in terms of religion. They don't think in terms of eternal truths. So they called it Hindu because they were living by the Indus River. And so people began to think that what India represents, spiritually speaking, is Hinduism. But it's not true. What India represents is what's known as Sanatan Dharma. And many of you know the word Dharma. It means right action, but more subtly, what Dharma means is that action which helps expand your consciousness, because that's how you can tell what right action is. It isn't what society wants or what your family necessarily wants or how you can make more money or whatever it might be. It's that action which expands your consciousness. And added to that idea of Dharma is the word Sanatan, which essentially means eternal. the eternal truth of spiritual life, or my favorite definition, that which is. Because what we're trying to understand is not anybody's culture, anybody's theology, anybody's dogma or practices. We're trying to put ourselves in right relation to reality. And reality isn't a matter of opinion. It's a definite existing vibration that we experience within ourselves. And if you think about your progress, anything that you would call progress in your life, it's always because your awareness increases. Your formal education, you increase your awareness of literature or music or art or science or whatever you're studying. In your interpersonal relationships, you're increasing your awareness of how to get along with other people, how to understand yourself, what properly brings harmony and happiness and what doesn't. And if you just reflect for a moment on any stage in your life that went through some kind of challenge perhaps to then some kind of greater enlightenment, we've increased our awareness. And every time we increase our awareness, it's a surprise, isn't it? Because by definition, we weren't aware of it before. So you have to ask the obvious question, how much is in front of us that we don't yet know? And one of the things that we gradually learn as we increase our awareness, and it's very simple, it's that reality always wins. No matter how much we say, I don't have to exercise, I don't have to eat well, and I can drink as much as I like, and everything's going to work out, something always happens, doesn't it? Reality always wins. So it serves us to understand everything that we're experiencing from the point of view of that which is, because the more profoundly we can harmonize ourselves with that which is, the better off we'll be. So one of the understandings of Sanatana Dharma, which has always been there and has also been present in many other ancient civilizations that are no longer with us, but pieces of what they understood are still there. And that is that this planet that we're living on is not just, we're primitive and then we're endlessly better and better and then we just get better and better. It's that the evolution, the experience of the quality of civilization on this planet is circular. And the Egyptians called it the age of man, the age of heroes, the age of demigods, the age of gods, 4. And the Greeks, I believe, called it the iron, the bronze, the silver, and the golden. And the Indian tradition has 4 also. Kali Yuga, which means the dark age, which is the age where matter is considered to be the only reality. Dwapara, which is the second age, in which we understand that energy is the reality, that matter is an expression of energy. Does that sound familiar? Matter is an expression of energy, and the energy can take multiple forms. The third age, according to the Sanatana Dharma way of understanding, Treta, which simply means 3, is the age of the power of thought. And the fourth age is called Satya, and that's truth, and that is the power of spirit, of the divine coming through all consciousness and understood to be so. Now, the Indian tradition, which is what I'm going to talk about, talks about this, and it's very fascinating, really, and scientific research is beginning, or has, to a large extent, endorsed a large part of this. First, I have to add a few other pieces to this. When Swami Kriyananda was living with Yogananda, he asked Yogananda the simple question, and you have to have reincarnation in here too. Kriyananda asked his guru, he said, do we always incarnate on planet Earth? Do we just keep coming back? Is there some kind of eternal quality to being earthlings? Yogananda actually laughed at the possibility. He said there are countless inhabited planets, and between our incarnations, we're in the astral world, we have all those choices, and we go to the planet that is having a civilization that is the most helpful to us in working out our personal karma. Now, there's lots of definitions of karma, and let me just put this one in here. Everyone in the world is motivated by two realities, which is we wish to avoid suffering and we have a very deep desire to be happy. Isn't that so? If you look at every single decision you made, the motivating force behind it was you thought it would decrease your suffering, you thought it would increase your happiness. In retrospect, many of those decisions were extremely stupid, but we didn't know it at the time. And that's how we learn, is that we're always, this is the equation we're always trying to balance. And this is how we gradually come into reality, because we know that suffering is not what's supposed to be happening, that we're supposed to be in a state of joy, in a state of bliss. So we make all these different decisions based on our understanding, and we find out how that works for you. You know, have you ever had one of your friends when you make the same mistake for the 150th time? And then they say to you, well, how's that working for you? You know, one of my friends asked me that when I was explaining some complicated attitude I was following. She just said, well, how is that working for you? I said, not very well. Then why do I keep doing it? I don't know. It seemed like a good idea at the time. That's all I can say. And what karma is an unlearned lesson about the nature of reality and what brings happiness and what causes suffering. I mean, I can go for hours giving you all kinds of, I won't today because I don't have time, but I can, all different aspects of it, but that's what it comes down to. And the drama of life is not civilizations. The drama is individual consciousness, because civilizations are just a reflection of individual consciousness. And our consciousness is always our own responsibility. Think about that. Whatever is going on around you, no matter how good or even how terrible it might be, all we ever experience is our inner world within it. That's why two people, if one is very depressed and one is not depressed, they'll see exactly the same circumstance and have 100% different experiences of it. And while we hear these remarkable stories of people, even in almost unbearably terrible circumstances, nonetheless manage somehow to rise above it, even to rise into a state of joy and compassion and kindness, because the real drama is our individual drama. And as we live and die and live and die and live and die, we leave the body, we go into the astral world, we survey all the possibilities, and we reincarnate in the place that's going to give us the experiences we need to increase our awareness and work out whatever karma we have left until we finally understand. So the capacity, talking now about planet Earth, scientists already know that at the center of our galaxy there's an enormous, inexplicable amount of energy. And our scientific methods have not gotten strong enough or far enough to really understand that. Sanatana Dharma has always talked about at the center of the galaxy there's this enormous fountain of energy that is not merely material energy, but also uplifting energy, the power to awaken, the power to make more subtle truths better known. And then Yogananda explains, our sun has a dual, and this is not woo-woo spirituality, this is astronomy. And once again, scientists are positing the same thing. And because of that dual, our solar system goes in an elliptical orbit. And that elliptical orbit takes us closer and then farther away from the central source of energy in our galaxy. And when our solar system, with planet Earth with it, gets closer to that center, the Earth itself receives many more enlightening energies than it receives when it's at the farthest point away from that. And so this planet, the energy field of this planet can sustain a more enlightened attitude and a greater understanding of reality when we're in the part of the orbit when we're closer to the galactic center. And in the same way, the farther away we get, the more the civilization begins to collapse. And all of these ages have been quantified very clearly. So now let me tell you, which everyone wants to know, where are we in the cycle? And also this whole cycle, moving closer and then moving farther away, it's a 24,000 year cycle. So you have 12,000 years where the civilization on this planet gets more and more enlightened. You reach a peak, and when you have Satya, the highest age here, it doesn't immediately drop to the lowest age. Rather, it goes from the peak of understanding, and then gradually that knowledge is lost. So it goes down like this, and then it goes backwards, the third age, the second age, the first age. So the nadir of this cycle was 500 years AD, after the death of Christ. Now, that's an interesting thing in itself, because that meant that Jesus incarnated at one of the lowest points, and it got worse afterwards. So it's important to understand, because we're not talking about, I'm an earthling, I'm going to cling to planet Earth for 24,000 years and then I'll be enlightened. It's not like that at all. The drama is individual. And even in the lowest point of civilization on the planet, individuals can still be fully enlightened because we have that freedom within it. It's just the world in which we live. So 500 AD was the nadir. That was the bottom of the lowest age going down, and then it started coming up the other side. And in the year 1700, it began to transition. And if you know even a little bit of history, people began to understand the nature of energy, kinds of energy, like steam, for example, as energy, or mechanical energy, instead of just physical, human energy. Prior to that, if you wanted to do anything with anything, you had a horse or you had a human body. But then they began to understand that there was more subtle kinds of energy that you could engage. Every age has a transition. So from 1700, it began to transition, and in 1900 is when Dwapara, the second age, the age of energy, really began. And it was right around that time that Einstein had a revelation. And he saw the nature of reality. And he said, it's not matter at all, it's energy. And the whole planet was changed by that. There's a cartoon that I saw once, and it was a street in New York about the turn of the century. And you saw all these different people who were on the street. You know, a mother was tending her baby, a street sweeper was cleaning up the street, a milkman was delivering the bottles, businessman's walking down the street. But all of them have paused. Just in the course of their everyday life, they've all paused like this. And the quote is from Einstein, and it says, mankind will gradually accustom themselves to an energy concept of the universe. So you see all these people gradually accustoming themselves to that energy concept, but you see what a difference it is? And so now, you know, we're like more than 100 years. Now think for a minute how everything has changed in the last 100 plus years. Everything has changed. All of you are sitting with these, you know, bright blue or red or green ears right now, right? And you're listening to me, and those of you who are listening not in English are hearing a manufactured voice translate this. Who could possibly say we're not in a rising age where technology is just coming forward? And what is this all about? This is all about subtle forms of energy. And of course, what also happens in these ages is that individuals' conception of themselves, the whole concept of what it is to be a human being. Now, the United States, which is the country that I was born into and still live in, and I don't say this in any way to be chauvinistic about it, but it is a fact. 250 years ago, in 1776, just as this began to change, the United States was founded on a very unusual principle for the time, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Nowadays, we more or less take that for granted, but it was an absolute revolution when it came. Because all of a sudden, we're not thinking, you have dark skin, you have light skin, you speak Swedish, you speak German, you live in the Swiss Alps, you live in the desert, therefore you're all different. You're a Christian, you're a Jew, therefore you're all different. Because the age of matter, it can't blend. I stand here on this, I can't go through this stage, because in the age of matter, things are separate. But now we understand that everyone in their own heart wants the same things, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Because whatever we look like, wherever we live, we're all the same. You see what a revolution that is? So what we see happening now, and what this festival is an example of, and what everybody speaking is talking about, is trying to find the way to grab that energy and manifest it in some way that is consistent with this new understanding, instead of just repeating everything that was true when we were going through Kali Yuga and all the dark time that came before. Now, one of the odd evidences of this circular pattern, I'll give you one, which is the pyramids in Egypt. There was an American movie made in which hundreds of Jewish slaves were by ropes pulled all those rocks up and stuck them in place. It was good drama, but bad understanding of reality. Everyone has read or heard and knows that there's just something extraordinarily mysterious and inexplicable about that, because we've lost the technology. One of the assertions of how it was really done is that they moved heavy objects with the power of sound, that they understood that. Now, that seems a little more than we know now, but how many of you who have ever been pregnant have ever had a sonogram? You know what that means? You have a picture of the baby in your womb by sound waves. How many of you have ever had a kidney stone removed by getting into a bath and being shot by sound waves? It's all around us. It's just people are beginning to perceive it. They're not really inventing the power of sound. They're beginning to understand the power of sound. And people are beginning to understand the power of cooperation and the power of oneness and the power of kindness. Whereas in lower ages on the planet, you simply couldn't understand that. Now, the trouble is that these transition periods, especially between the age of matter and the age of energy, either going up or coming down, they're very tumultuous. For those of you who've heard of the Mahabharata, which is the great epic of India, or the Bhagavad Gita, which is a chapter from that epic, that was the incarnation of Krishna. And that was a war that just wiped out everything. That was very close to exactly where we are right now, except it was going down. And the forces of matter were coming in to try to take over, and the forces of energy were trying to hold on. But in order to make it work, there had to be an explosion of that conflict. So we're on the other side coming up. Now I have to go back to individual karma. One of the most comforting and also the most annoying facts about that which is that we are all children of the same divine force, and we're all equally loved by God, whom I like to speak of as my divine mother, not because I'm in a female body and I want to assert my side of the coin, nothing like that. But the divine mother is it's actually what Jesus was referring to when he said, after I am gone, I will send you the Comforter. Can you think of a more perfect way to describe an ideal mother than the Comforter? When I was about 7, my parents sent me to sleepaway camp. And I was a precocious kid, so even though I was only 7, I had a really great time. But I was younger than most of the kids in the camp. And one of the exercises that they did, was to weave you had these little looms and you had these little stretchy bands. Some of you, I don't know what countries you're from, and if all countries make these little, everybody knows these little rubber bands. You make pot holders to give to your parents. My little fingers, for some reason, I couldn't make any pot holders. Parent night comes. It's parent night, parent visitation. And so we were in bunk beds and we had nails on our bunks, and everybody hung their pot holders on their nails. I didn't have any pot holders, but the girl above me had quite a few. So I took a couple of hers and I just put them on mine, because then I had pot holders too, like that. Of course, she noticed, and she wasn't really very fond of it. So the time comes, and now my parents are there, and I'm just devastated. I'm just so upset about this. And I remember saying, they fell. I tried to convince them, little children are so ingenuous, they fell. I said like that. In my family, you did not lie. Honesty was an extremely important thing. But here's what's so interesting to me, and I'm talking about Divine Mother. I had very good parents, I have to say. I'm sure my parents must have spoken sternly to me, because to steal and lie was not something I could have gotten away with at the age of 7. But what I actually remember is my mother putting her arms around me and just letting me repeat that they fell over and over, and she just comforted me. And that's what I remember. That was more than 70 years ago, and I can still feel that. Everything that happens in this human world is a symbol of higher truths. And we have to use words. There's no Divine Mother cooking heavenly breakfast for Heavenly Father up there somewhere. We're just using words to give us a way to experience realities that are actually there, but are too subtle for the words that we use. So one of the realities of human life, one of the principles of Sanatana Dharma, is we are all manifestations of the same infinite energy, and that infinite energy is a loving force that is there to help us to increase our awareness until we truly understand what causes suffering, what brings happiness, and that we have the power to make the choice, to make the right choice. That's the karma that we're always working with. So we like to think that God likes some of us better than others, especially the people that are most like us, whatever that us might be. If it's the church that you go to, or the race that you have, or the culture, we tend to think that God follows our preferences. I mean, isn't that obvious? Why else would he be in charge if he wasn't like me and like you? But in the age of energy, all that gets very confusing, because we're all the same. And one of the things that Yogananda brought to the world from the Indian teachings is this idea of Divine Mother, not for the gender specific, but for the comfort that it would bring to us if we want to have a relationship. And everyone is equally loved, and everyone has the same potential for freedom, for greatness, and for joy. And every one of us has the free will to take as long as we want to learn. And the other part of it is we only learn from experience. We can be frightened into pretending we learn. If you think you're going to go to hell for eternity, it disciplines you a little bit in the moment. But we don't really believe it. We're just too afraid. I mean, we don't really know why. We're just being told. That's dogma. We don't feel like that anymore. Now we're asserting our own realities. So we have to have the opportunity to have experience. And there are a great many souls that are firmly convinced that the more power I can get, no matter who I get it from, the more I have, no matter how much it deprives you, that's what's going to make me happy. And so when you're in the astral world, getting ready to pick your next incarnation, the angels and the saints and the masters will help you go to where you need to go to learn what you need to learn next. And because mother loves her children equally, sometimes she loves her naughty children even more. If you need to have that experience, you'll be born into a planetary context that will allow you to have it. That's what we have going on right now. We have a great many people coming up. And again, I refer to the fact that I've traveled so much. I was rather pessimistic about the future, in a sense, before I started traveling. But every country that I've gone to, there is an enormous power of light just coming right up out of the ground like wild mushrooms. It's not being legislated. It's not being run by the government. It's just growing like weeds because consciousness is rising, and a lot of us are here. Simultaneously, a lot of souls that need the lesson of power and greed and violence and many things that we wish weren't going to happen are also on this planet with us. Because at times like this, especially this transition, most of the time humanity is sort of shaped like a cigar. And you have a few good people on this side and a few bad people on this side, and most people just hang out without thinking much about it in the fat middle of it. Times like this, there is no middle. Either you are still holding on to the past and trying to make the future look like the past, which is what many of our politicians and militarists and many, many others, they think that the past is the way things ought to be, and we're going to make it that way with the power of our might. And then on this side, you have those who know that this is the age of rising energy. However, there is a lot of material power on this side of it. And history shows, other cycles have shown, and common sense tells us that there's going to be a collision between these. However, we are rising, and the fact that we're rising means that once the turbulence is over, then there will be a much more enlightened civilization as a whole. Bear in mind, however, the masters say that war continues all the way through Dwapara Yuga. Now, if people can go to war, we're still not that enlightened. You have to realize that. So we're not coming according to this way of understanding. There's no power that we can bring to bear that is going to make the civilization on this planet perfect. However, we can use this opportunity. An opportunity like the one we're in right now is magnificent for our soul development, because we're able to be instruments of light at a time when being an instrument of light is not that easy, or not that popular, or not that well understood. And the other side of that is that we get to work out whatever karma we have of fear and anxiety and distrust of Divine Mother's comforting love. Because that fear, that distrust, that lack of faith, causes us to make decisions that cause us to suffer rather than leading to happiness. So that's what we're working with. That's where we are right now. It will get better. It is getting better. Look around. I've often mentioned that, well, I was in the New York airport and there was a big sign that said, no smoking anywhere in this airport. And I'm old enough to remember when people smoked everywhere. And whether you like smoking or don't like smoking, but what happened? That people just stopped doing that. And everywhere I go in the world, there are vegan restaurants. And you can buy plant milk. And you can buy plant milk yogurt, But even the vegan restaurant, think about it for a minute. Think compassion for animals, a desire to live in a more healthy way. All those understandings had to come through. And they weren't legislated. They just rose up out of the ground. In the USA, of course, if there's money in it, we'll do it. That's basically our great talent and attitude toward life. So, but in any country where someone is going to open such a restaurant, somebody has to want to, then you have to have enough customers to be able to do it. But think of the change that means. Look at us here. The Festival of Consciousness, 10 years ago, who could have even put on such a thing, much less had anybody come? And that's our assignment. Our assignment is to just constantly walk this forward, and in the process, to work out our own karma. Now, my belief and my hope in telling you all of this is not to discourage us, because I don't believe historically or philosophically that we can actually perfect what's going on here, because the age is too low, it's too soon for it to be like that. But we can perfect ourselves, and we can make ourselves powerful in that way. You don't become powerful just by wanting to be so. You become powerful by facing into whatever challenges are in front of us and holding on to what you know to be the right way of thinking and the right way of behaving. If it were easy to love everyone, what would we learn? We would still be small. We always want it to be easy. One of my most interesting observations, and I see it in myself too, everyone thinks it should be different. We just think it should be different. We want this world to be different. The self that identifies with the limitation of being in this one body in this one lifetime and thinks that this is the only reality that there is, good means easy and pleasurable. Think about how many times you've called something good because it was easy and pleasurable. When you use the word karma, bad karma. Bad karma means challenging and difficult. Bad karma means, oh rats, I have to grow. How annoying. Easy and pleasurable means I just get to stay exactly as I am. Why is that good? This is because we're in a rising age of energy. We can't just stay as we were. The energy is moving us. Something else that happens in a rising age, which, going back to Jesus for a moment, at the end of Jesus' life, his disciples, there was nothing to do for the society. The society was low consciousness and it was going down. They didn't just crucify Jesus. They crucified anybody they didn't like. And they crucified them on the side of the road. I mean, that kind of barbarism is just like horrible to us, because in a rising age, we can't imagine that anymore. So anyone in that age who became inspired because Jesus taught the same teachings. He taught Sanatana Dharma. He was a great master. He had the same revelation. And his teachings were absolutely true and could transform and can still transform if you understand it as Jesus really taught it. But there was no point in trying to build a society. So you got to go off to the desert, or you got to go off to the monasteries. Sometimes I think that's very attractive, to just be able to wash your hands of the whole planet and just concentrate on your own expansion of consciousness. But what's happening in an age like this one is that we have to help bring it in. We have to help bring in the new age. And that's why monasteries are emptying, and people are not interested anymore in just taking what they have and going away with it. We want to get engaged. We want to make the world a better place. And the reason we have the inclination to do that is because it challenges our consciousness. It forces us to grow. Our compassion, our kindness, our idealism, our imagination, our creativity gets engaged, and we don't want to quit until we learn how to do it. And what happens in that? We work out our karma. We learn things we didn't know about energy and courage and attunement. So even if this world gets as difficult as Yogananda and many others have predicted, in the obvious ways that you can imagine, earth problems, economic problems, violence, which is already springing up in lots of places, even if all of that happens, it is what we have to understand. This is exactly where we need to be in order to learn exactly what we need to learn. I often think that whenever those who are trying to make the future look like the past finally get done with whatever they're doing and all the dust settles and all of us are still here, it'll take us, I think, about 5 minutes to create a new society, because we already know how. They don't know we're here, and they don't think we're very important. They think we're just the lunatic fringe that doesn't matter. We can see them, but they can't see us, in the sense that they don't see any importance in us. But their day is past because we're the new idea. Everything happens. You have an idea, you put energy into it, and then it manifests. And so the new ideas are always moving in before those who are holding on to the past know about it. So this is what we're doing, and this is our job. Somewhere in the astral world between our incarnations, our guides pointed out, oh, Earth is going to go through some really exciting changes. I think that would be a good place for you, you know? But here's the other part of it, and this is the last thing I'll say here. The reason difficult times come is to wake people up so that they'll begin to understand that this isn't just about snuggling down and getting my place set and then having it be pleasurable and easy. This incarnation and all incarnations are given to us so that we can grow. And two things happen when we commit ourselves to growth. Well, many things happen. But one of the things that happen when you commit yourself to growing from the inside out, not just acquiring and making it work, but changing our fundamental perception of reality, is that we develop a powerful magnetism of our own. Because there is such a thing as planetary karma and national karma and cultural karma. All that really exists. But it only affects you if you have no self-definition of your own. If you're just floating on the river trying to take the easy way out, then whichever way the river's going, you'll go with. But if you have been working in yourself deeply to develop your own understanding of reality, that creates a force field which makes your karma different. You don't need to be shocked awake. You'll just be able to move as you know you ought to move, no matter what the karma around you is doing. So events like this, the experiences that we have, just bringing our energy to a focus together is much more powerful and important than it may look. Because each one of us then is beginning to, like we're part of a tide. We're part of a tide that's coming in. And the power of that tide is determined entirely by the commitment and the courage and the dedication of each one of us. And we were born for this hour. We were born for this hour. In the Bible, Jesus declares about his crucifixion, I was born for this hour. But the fact of the matter is, every one of us, the hour that we're living in, we've spent incarnations working up to this moment. And whatever is in front of us, to choose the light, to choose the light, to choose the light. That was why we came in at this time, at any time. And so what fun, what joy, what a marvelous time to be living, regardless of the fear or the challenge or the difficulties we may go through, because we'll have that opportunity to build that within ourselves, to choose the light, to choose the light. And when this incarnation ends, whether it ends sooner or later for each one of us, that's all you have. When I was 18, one of the things that put me on the spiritual path was I had this sort of, I had sort of a vision. It was sort of a vision, but not a big, exciting one like that. But I was 18 and I saw myself on my deathbed. I didn't even know anybody who had died at that point, what to speak of being at anybody's deathbed. But I subsequently in my life, because of the community I live in, I have sat with people as they have transitioned, including my own father. But what I realized was when the incarnation was over and I was ready to leave, it didn't matter how many people loved me. And in my expectation, a whole lot of people loved me. I was on my deathbed and there was everything that you would imagine of tons of people who loved me and family like that. I was always very optimistic about my prospects in life. But I could tell, I could feel this again before I even knew that the process of dying was that you just get more and more inside yourself. Just it all begins to fade away. I've since learned all the metaphysics of going into the spine and the Kundalini energy and all those things. I didn't know any of it, but I knew it. It just goes in like this, and I realized all you have is your consciousness. And this is what all the death and return people tell us. That's all you have. You take off your body just like you take off a suit of clothes, but you are still yourself. Just like when you change into your pajamas the end of this day. You're not going to be somebody else. You're just going to be you in your pajamas, aren't you? So this is what we are. We're yourself in this body, and you take this body off, and you yourself just goes on, just like all the movies you see now, when the actor falls over and then the actor stands up again and goes off, except that they can go through the walls and all this. It's very true, a lot of that. But you see, that's the job. That's why we're here. That's the increasing awareness. That's Sanatan Dharma. And because this is a tricky business and there's a lot of problems here, oh my goodness, what a lot of good work we can do. And what a lot of fun we can have doing it, and do a little good for others along the way. Isn't that wonderful? Don't you think that's wonderful? Okay, I'm going to believe you think that's wonderful. That's all I have to say. Bless you. Okay.